The final participant of the panel is Mr. Akaash Maharaj, who is CEO of the Global Organization of Parliamentarians Against Corruption. He leads also the International Alliance of Legislators in its work combating corruption, strengthening good governance, and upholding the rule of law. He also leads GOPAC's efforts on international prosecution of grand corruption and its work in conflict states. He'll be sharing his thoughts with us on the topic, how can national democracies reassert public accountability over offshore anonymous corporations? Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Akaash Maharaj.
Thank you, Mark. I will be brief because I know enough not to stand between hungry people and an overdue lunch. So, of course, I should like to begin by thanking Ogmunda and the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy for inviting me to be here and for organizing this event. And in addition, to thank the people of Iceland for hosting our roundtable. I think it's fair to say that Iceland has a special place in the hearts of all of us who are involved in international relations, because though it is a country of small scale, it has had an outsized effect on the imagination of the world on international subjects, be it in dialogue between East and West during the Cold War, or more recently, the popular decision by Icelanders to defy the global consensus during the global financial crisis. Iceland is a small country, but it's a small country that roars. As Mark said, I'm here on behalf of the Global Organization of Parliamentarians Against Corruption. Our legislators come from different cultures, they speak different languages, they profess different faiths, and some of them have been on opposite sides of civil and international wars. But we are all united by a single article of faith, and that is our shared conviction that at this moment in history, corruption has become the single greatest threat to the prosperity of societies, to the security of nations, and to human rights of peoples everywhere. To give but a single example, political corruption kills approximately 140,000 children every year by depriving them of food, water, and medical care. It is the great shame of our time. And while corruption takes many forms, I'm going to focus on one, and that is organized industrial-scale tax evasion. To put it into context, tax evasion deprives the world's citizens of more than $3.1 trillion every year. By contrast, the total cost of achieving the United Nations Millennium Development Goals would have been less than $500 billion. And those goals included eliminating extreme hunger and poverty, installing universal primary education, halving the proportion of people around the world without access to clean water and sanitation, reducing child mortality by 2/3, reducing maternal mortality by 3/4, and halting the spread of HIV and AIDS. The great tragedy of the human condition is that there is a better world within our grasp, a world without hunger, a world without thirst, a world without needless disease. And it is corruption, and in particular tax evasion, that is stealing that world from us. Now, tax evasion is a huge subject, and I will focus in a short amount of time on the question of the use of offshore anonymous corporations by major economic actors, organized crime and terrorist networks to hide their wealth and the evidence of their crimes, in essence, to thwart domestic justice and to evade taxation. The brutal question is, how is it possible for national democracies to reassert public accountability in an era when money can flit across borders at a moment's notice, and where there are jurisdictions around the world that have traded upon the setup of anonymous corporations? And there are many ways of doing so, but GOPAC believes that there is one that takes precedence above all others, and that is for national democracies to create national, publicly accessible registries of beneficial ownership of corporation. These are registries that, in essence, require corporations that, or say to corporations, they can only operate, they can only hold assets, indeed they can only exist within a given jurisdiction if they publicly declare who the individuals are behind the corporations, who owns the corporations, who benefits from the wealth, who are the controlling minds. It ensures that individuals who have illicit intentions cannot hide behind a veil of corporate anonymity to evade taxes or indeed to break the law. These registers ensure that the true owners of corporations and the true holders of wealth are known to public institutions, to the media, and to citizens. In our view, every country that cares about human rights and that cares about its own citizens' welfare and who cares about the state belonging to its citizens should set up public registries of beneficial ownership. But we recognize that it only takes one jurisdiction somewhere in the world to flout this principle, to become the haven of choice for anonymous corporations. So we believe that in addition, democracies should create a legal obligation for their citizens and for their permanent residents to declare any interest that they hold in offshore corporations if those corporations are anonymous and held in other jurisdictions. And finally, we also believe that it is important that national democracies prohibit anonymous corporations that are incorporated in other jurisdictions from holding assets or operating within their jurisdictions until and unless they adhere to the standards of beneficial ownership. This is easy to say, it is politically difficult to achieve, but I think that it is an idea whose time has certainly come. The Panama Papers have recently exposed a gargantuan network of offshore and anonymous corporations that exist at the margins of the law or outside of the law. The journalists who are in charge of them are still wading through the documents. There are 11.5 million documents detailing anonymous and offshore corporations. At a single 3-desk address in the Cayman Islands, a single office that has 3 desks in the Cayman Islands is the registered office of 20,000 separate corporations. And worse still is that while it would be inappropriate for me to comment on the motives or the potential guilt of specific individuals, it has shaken public faith in democracies that the people who have been named in the Panama Papers include some of the people whose responsibility it is to steward democracies. The Prime Ministers of the United Kingdom, of Iceland, the now former Prime Minister of Iceland, the serving President of Ukraine, members of Spain and Saudi Arabia's royal families. It raises the real specter in the minds of, and legitimately raises the specter in the minds of peoples around the world, that the laws that bind the weak and the powerless do not bind the great and the powerful. And if we are to call ourselves true democracies capable of upholding human rights or indeed merely governing our countries in the names of our peoples, we cannot allow major economic actors to operate from the shadows. By its nature, corruption thrives in the dark and withers before the glare of public scrutiny, and beneficial ownership registries are, in our view, the single most powerful tool to ensure that the light of public scrutiny falls upon the owners of wealth, public and private. Along these lines, we actually do commend the actions by the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, who must take the prize for having the worst timing of anyone involved in anti-corruption, because at the moment that his own involvement in offshore assets was revealed was at the same time that he was bringing in a beneficial ownership registry for the United Kingdom. That is an important registry. We think that it will change the world, especially because of the simple fact that the City of London is such an important center for global finances. But we do not believe it goes far enough for one tragic flaw, and that is it does not apply to the British overseas territories and Crown dependencies. And those jurisdictions have become the jurisdictions of choice for offshore corporations. More than half the companies named in the Panama Papers are incorporated in a single island, the British Virgin Islands. And the truth is, the good that will be done by the beneficial ownership registry in the United Kingdom will be undone if anonymous corporations that are active in that country can simply relocate to another British jurisdiction and continue to operate anonymously and without public scrutiny. Having said that, it is important for us not to underestimate the importance of that decision and the fact that no previous Prime Minister in British history has gone this far. This really is, in our view, the challenge of our time. In many of the countries represented around in this room, you cannot go into a liquor store and buy alcohol without showing identification. In virtually all the countries in this room, you certainly can't go into a hunting store and buy ammunition without showing some identification. You shouldn't be able to operate a billion-dollar corporation without anyone knowing who you are and what you're doing. At the end of the day, many people ask the question, is corruption a human rights issue? Corruption is absolutely a human rights issue. Corruption now kills more people than war and famine combined. And if that is not an assault on human rights, I don't know what is. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Maharaj, and to all of the panelists, really, for a series of excellent presentations, really from beginning until end. I think we all greatly benefited from that.